What's going on, everyone? I'm just a typical average American here today to react and learn about culture shocks in Canada. Americans seem to experience countless culture shocks when visiting Canada, particularly for the first time. But what's also interesting today about this discussion is this includes culture shocks that Canadians can experience in Canada because Canada is such a massive place. And apparently, the different provinces and regions and places you can live in Canada vary so widely that Canadians can experience strange, interesting culture shock just traveling to different parts of Canada, just like when Americans visit any part of Canada. So I thought this discussion was kind of a double whammy, kind of extra interesting. Someone was asking, what are some culture shocks you've experienced when visiting the rest of the country, the rest of Canada? So I think this is going to talk about some of the obscure places in Canada that you can visit that are a little unique, a little different, a little shocking, if you will. Mine is Newfoundland. Everything from the music to the accents, traditions, and the island itself felt like a copy and paste of Ireland. Didn't feel like Canada. You heard it here first. Newfoundland is more like Ireland than Canada? Is that possible? Even the accent and the music. This is, man, this almost makes me want to, like, I could do a whole video about, is this true? How true is this? Is Newfoundland like its own country out there? Like, and funny that it's so similar to Ireland. I wonder why that is. Newfoundland is basically its own thing all the way over there. Okay. Wow. I've been to both Newfoundland and Ireland. Not a lot of difference. Accent, culture, right by the sea, it's quite similar. Newfoundland and Ireland. Though I will say that Newfoundland is a heck of a lot closer, so if you want the Irish experience, you don't need to go far. Wow, it's like a mini Ireland just here in North America. It's kind of convenient. Uh my answer is the inverse. I sometimes discover that certain phrases that people commonly say in Newfoundland aren't common in the rest of Canada. Yeah, yeah. Wow. Okay. Agreed. Newfoundland is unique, even along the Maritimes. Wow. Even for like the eastern provinces by water? Interesting. Very interesting. Flashing green light, meaning something entirely different in Ontario, Quebec? Flashing green light? Are we talking about driving? You're telling me a green light isn't the same in Ontario or Quebec? My Montreal friend gave me a heart attack driving in British Columbia? Wait, a flashing green light? A flashing green light? Yeah, you don't really encounter flashing green lights in America. I wouldn't even know what that's trying to say. Huh. What does it mean in British Columbia? Yeah, I kind of want to know. What does it mean? Pedestrian controlled light? In other words, that light won't turn red until a pedestrian pushes the button to cross? Huh. It means oncoming traffic is still oncoming. Okay. Interesting. All right. I don't want to get too bogged down in the specifics of traffic. We don't have flashy green lights in Alberta. And every time I go to another province, I just drive. I make sure no one is around and hope a cop doesn't see me. I feel like that's exactly what I would do. I'd be like, flashing green light. I don't know what this means. And just drive and kind of look around and just go. Kind of get away from there. Okay, I'm glad I'm not alone. In my experience, the differences in Canada are more defined between urban and rural Canada than between different regions or cities. I was born and raised in a large city. Living in a small town was a major adjustment. Sure, sure, sure. This makes sense. Same kind of thing you can experience in America as well. Life in a big city versus a small town is wildly different. I think that's true wherever you are in the world, honestly. For instance, I remember being at a bank and a cashier and a customer suddenly broke out into a lengthy personal conversation. And that probably wouldn't happen in a major city. Yeah, it would be seen as rude. Yeah, okay, I get that. But some people really appreciate that aspect of living in a small town or something because it is more friendly. People do know each other and are kind of more on a personal level, even during work, you might say. So I don't know. Some people might view it as a good thing. Other people who are going from a big city to a small town might just get annoyed. I guess that's the point they're making. That completely over the top TV Canadian accent actually does exist, though not in many places. It does exist. I've heard many conflicting reports about this, about the American stereotypical Canadian accent. Oh, what are you going to do today, buddy? That kind of thing. And I've been led to believe, and this is somewhat confirming that right now, that this accent does exist somewhere in Canada. Whenever someone tries to do a Canadian accent, it is usually just the movie Fargo. Oh, I haven't seen that. Oh, I wish I knew the reference they were making. Uh, Outside of Quebec, people speak English and say A. All right, very funny. Very funny. Yeah. Although, it's good to like appreciate that from the perspective of someone born and raised their whole life in Quebec. They're like, "Oh wow, outside of here, like people only speak English." And they say, "Hey, I can I don't know if this is supposed to be a joke, but to me it comes across as kind of a joke." But I'm not a Quebecian. Quebecer? Quebecite? Quebecian? One who lives in Quebec. I am not. When I went out west, suddenly people were saying hey instead of a. Took me a while to realize I wasn't being yelled at. This is a weird one, but in Ontario and Quebec, you'll be driving around and a residential area where there is a road, then a ditch, then somebody's house pretty close to the road. In Alberta, residential areas always have a curb. If you're in a rural area where there's a ditch, the house would be further back too. Huh, that's interesting. If you're in Ontario and Quebec, driving around a residential area, there's not as many curbs protecting you from driving into ditches and stuff. Okay, interesting. That's quite specific. Try a rural road in Nova Scotia. Speed limit of 80 or 90 kilometers an hour with narrow snaking roads, no shoulders, blind corners everywhere, and telephone poles and houses next to the road. Sheesh. As a driver, don't you dare enjoy the scenery. It's really a residential road, which would have a speed limit of 50 kilometers an hour in other parts of Canada, but in Nova Scotia, it's a highway. Oh my gosh. Intense. This exists in Manitoba. Okay. Okay. Nova Scotia has amazing beaches. Does it? Let me see here. Let me do Nova Scotia beaches. I remember this a little bit from an older video I did looking at Nova Scotia. Yeah, I can confirm. It has very beautiful beaches. Okay. Prince Edward Island has better beaches. Yeah, maybe this is like, for me, since I know about the existence of Nova Scotia and Prince Edward Island, I'm like, yeah, it has beaches because of islands and water. But to most Americans, they have not the faintest idea where Nova Scotia or Prince Edward Island is in Canada or anything like that. So I think the existence of these amazing beaches would be shocking and culture shock to most Americans. When I first saw that, I know I was pretty shocked. So I think that's this is actually pretty true. Donaires on the East Coast are not like donaires in the West. Donaires? What's a donaire? It's a fried meat slice sandwich? I doubt it. Donair, Canada? How to make the famous Atlantic Canadian Halifax? A donair is a type of sandwich? Wait, it is a sandwich. It's a type of sandwich or wrap that originated in Nova Scotia. Oh, okay. Donairs on the East Coast are not like donairs on the West. Okay. We are talking about food. Okay. The latter is more like a Turkish donair and have different vegetables and a decent amount of donair meat on them. Well, I wouldn't be culture shocked by the different type of donair. I would be culture shocked by the existence of this thing that is called a donair. So take that for what you will. Doner and donair are pretty distinct, along with gyro, shawarma, pita. Oh man, I can't keep up with all this. I'd never had a donair till I moved out west. Same. Going from a province with 15% sales tax to Alberta? Does Alberta have more or less sales tax? Let me see here. Alberta sales tax. Is it very bad or very good? 5% compared to... Okay, so it's very low. Going from a province with 15% sales tax to 5. Wow, 5? 5. Wow. Alberta continues to have an overall tax advantage with no sales tax. Wait. No sales tax? No payroll tax? Wait, what? Can this be true? It's either 5% or 0, which is both insane. Wow. Wonder why that is, or how that is. West Coast doesn't have bagged milk, which is super popular in Ontario Eastern provinces. See, I did think that bagged milk existed in all of Canada. I kind of enjoyed having that thought, but the reality is crashing in on me now that the West Coast of Canada doesn't have bagged milk. I wonder why that is. Why does it just... Some of these things are so strange and random that I just wonder how they happened. I don't think I'm ever going to quite know the history of bagged milk, but okay. Super popular in Ontario and Eastern provinces. Okay. We had bagged milk in British Columbia in the 70s, but it never caught on. All right. Oh, getting a pop-up here. Excuse me. In Saskatchewan, they used to have bagged milk, and a milkman would deliver it to your door. But that was around 30 years ago. Such a thing doesn't exist. Man, the good old days when the milkman would deliver a bag of milk to your door. Sounds like a wild fever dream to me. I can only imagine, but no, it is not. It is actually a place called Saskatchewan in Canada. Not a dream. Newfoundland doesn't have it, but apparently the rest of Eastern Canada does. Okay. Wow, I didn't know bagged milk was regional in Canada. Okay. Canadians are super polite. Wait. This is supposed to be a discussion on the culture shocks of Canada. This is like the least shocking thing ever if you have ever looked up or learned anything about Canada at all. In towns, well, apparently this person went into Canada thinking Canadians were just all jerks. So Canadians are actually super polite. In towns, you step on the foot of someone and they apologize to you. Maybe the culture shock they're experiencing is how polite Canadians are. Maybe I misinterpreted. Maybe it's they thought Canadians were polite, but they're super polite. You can physically hurt them, and Canadians will say, "I'm so sorry that you hurt me." In the countryside, in villages, Canadians are warm and welcoming. I remember visiting random places, and people were talkative, proud of their little paradise. Seriously, Canada is a very nice place. Wow, that's lovely. Good to hear. What else do we have here? How humid most of this place is. The dry prairie weather can beat up your skin. But it's nice to not feel like you're stewing in... But it's nice to feel like you're not stewing in your own juices. Indeed, it's nice to not feel that way. Humid. Okay. Humid. Huh. Is that because of the cold? Yep, flying from Alberta to Ontario, you're going from one of the driest regions of North America to the most humid. Oh, right, humid means there's a lot of moisture in the air. Huh. Huh, and does the cold make it drier? Or I'm no good with this stuff, but apparently it's a flip of a coin in Canada whether you're gonna whether it's death by dry air or by wet air. Who knows? Traveled extensively through rural Quebec, knew what to expect, traveled through northern New Brunswick, Caraquet, and Shippagan, Acadia country, and it was another world. Lovely people, okay? Sorting trash? In British Columbia, it's perfectly normal to have four bins in places like schools, shopping malls. I was confused when I was in a mall in Ontario and only saw two bins. I didn't know where to put my pop cans, so in some places in Canada, sorting trash is more serious? Is that what I'm hearing here? That we are very much getting into the weeds of culture shock at this point. Back in the 80s, I visited Gander, Newfoundland from Vancouver in winter. The warmest day was negative 25. It took a couple days to understand what the locals were saying. This is in Newfoundland. Newfoundland, okay, where earlier someone was saying that it's basically like a little Ireland. And I distinctly remember that every item on the menu at McDonald's came with a 12% tax. Totally different world. Wow. Newfoundland and Quebec really sound like the places where there's culture shock within Canada. Like Canadians can go to Quebec and Newfoundland and be like, where am I? So then you turn and see an American over trying to survive and they're like, I don't know where we are. And they're even more confused. I moved as a teen from the city to a rural area and I expected friendliness. Maybe this is what foreigners experience here in Canada. People were polite and nice, but not friendly. They didn't need another friend. Well, there is a difference between being polite and courteous to strangers. That does not necessarily mean they're going to immediately make you their best friend. I wouldn't even expect that. I think Canadians are very polite and have a lot of respect for each other, but just because they're being friendly doesn't mean you're going to instantly become their friend. That's a little different. So, I don't know. Maybe people do go into Canada thinking that because people are very friendly and nice and open, that just means everyone's gonna like become your friend and you're gonna have a million Canadian friends. But I wouldn't necessarily expect it to work like that. That's kind of a different thing. The biggest shock was driving in and around Vancouver. Drivers in British Columbia are polite, courteous, obey traffic laws to a degree that was shocking to my Toronto sensibilities. So, going from Toronto to Vancouver, the shock is that people are polite and courteous and actually obey the traffic laws. Ha! Oh, and people will strongly argue that Vancouver drivers are the worst. Man, so you just can't make anyone happy, honestly. Which is the least shocking thing in this thread that I've read. Everyone will claim their city has the worst drivers. Yep, pretty much. I'm going to say that if I ran into anywhere in Canada where there were, like, actually drivers who cared about not crashing into you, I'd be like, wow, Canada's so different than America. The shock I was in seeing how much money the rest of Canada has compared to my home in Newfoundland. From the infrastructure, technology, cars, roads, seeing how far the rest of Canada has developed compared to here. Really? That's interesting. Small town, average household income is 16,000. Toronto, 140,000? Oh my gosh. As an Alberta to Ontario transplant, I would have to be the lack of sidewalks and back alleys in the residential neighborhoods. Okay. Also, how there are still phone booths everywhere. That would make me feel like I was sent back in time. I was pleasantly surprised to discover a vibrant French community in Winnipeg. Huh, where is Winnipeg again? I'm sorry. Where is Manitoba? Okay. French community in Winnipeg, Manitoba. Okay, I would never have known that. What else we got here? First time visiting Quebec from Ontario. I was surprised how nice everyone was. I've always heard that people from that Quebec Canadians were a-holes and not to go there, but everyone was nice and very patient with my terrible and basic French. Well, I mean, when you go different places around the world, and I'm not saying that Quebec is a whole different country than Canada, but I know it's very different. So I think because of the French speaking, I would imagine French speakers in Quebec would appreciate if you attempt to use basic and your basic terrible French. Like if you make an effort, just show an effort to try to make it. And then probably Canadians in Quebec are probably a lot maybe open and nicer seeing you put in that effort. So I have heard this stereotype about people in Quebec being like New Yorkers in America, like a little aggressive, a little. It is because New York kind of is like its own. It's kind of like its own place, its own existence, kind of like Quebec. But this is kind of nice because I have heard this about different places around the world that speak different languages. So it doesn't surprise me. Just put a little effort in. Try to use a little terrible French, and it probably goes a long way. Putting a little effort, respecting the language and all that. Had a few think my terrible French was funny, and after watching me struggle, would switch to English. Yeah, yeah. And they have good poutine. Yeah. The outdoor spiral staircases to the front doors in Quebec. They are awesome. Outdoor spiral staircases to the front door? That's just fancy. That just sounds cool. Okay. Didn't realize that the Real Canadian Superstore was mainly just a Western thing. Real Canadian Superstore? I didn't know there was such a thing. Chain of supermarkets owned by Canadian food retailing giant Loblaw. Real Canadian Superstore? What are they selling there? At the Real Canadian Superstore? Wow, I want to learn about that at some time. Apparently that's only a Western Canada thing. What else do we have? Newfoundland again. The grocery stores, no vegetables or fruit, but 14 different flavors of cake mix. One thing I'm really learning today is if you want to experience culture shock in Canada as a Canadian, go to Newfoundland or Quebec. And that's all you need to do. So Americans would kind of just have their whole mind blown going there, because I think most Americans would already have experienced a lot of culture shock. Most of the things talked about here, just anywhere in Canada, but then going to even the places in Canada that are a little unique would just maybe be too much for Americans to even wrap their head around. And a lot of people here saying that living in a rural area in Canada compared to urban, like a city, a bustling big city life compared to a small town, which is absolutely true, but that's totally true in America and probably most places around the world, but certainly true in Canada as well. Ordering coffee at Tim's in Quebec in English and hoping for the best at the next window. Ordering McDonald's in Quebec and expecting le combo. But they call it the triple because you order 3 items. The triple? Well, I could say the triple. Okay. Le triple, s'il vous plaît. Turns out no one else thinks Toronto is the best place in Canada. It was weird. So Torontonians think Toronto is the best place in Canada. You know what? I'm okay with that. Wherever you grew up, wherever you are, I think it's okay to just say, hey, this is the best place. I think that's a fine attitude to have, but also appreciate the other parts of Canada too. Okay. Man, this just goes on and on and on, but these are good. I think I read most of the top rated comments here about the culture shocks you can experience in Canada, and I thought these were great. Oh my gosh, there are seriously, I never knew how different Canada could be within Canada. I mean, I shouldn't be so surprised because within America, you can travel all around America and it will take you forever and you will visit some places in America that are wildly different from each other. And it kind of just makes sense when you think about it for 2 seconds that same exact thing in Canada. Same exact thing. It's just that I've never experienced that growing up. I never got to. I grew up watching American stuff on television and movies and in the news. So I know how different parts of America are, but today I really got to appreciate how different parts of Canada are, which I think is fascinating and quite entertaining to learn about. So I enjoyed this. Anyway, if you enjoyed this as well, feel free to give this video a like or leave a comment. And if you're interested in more videos like this, me reacting to Canada or Canadian culture or stuff about Canada that I've never learned about before, feel free to subscribe for more. And until then, thanks for watching and see you next time.